Hey guys, we're continuing on with book 4, so this is book 4, part 2. And if you want the name of this book, if you find this material fascinating, simply call the number, which will be my number. Text it. Texting is better, honestly, because if I don't know the number, I'm probably not going to answer it. Text it and request for the information on book 4, and I'll zippity do that right to you. So, one example, first of all, I gotta get toned in. I've had this trippy book on my mind since I woke up this morning, so let's find out why. One example which shows the close connection between UFOs and mental metal bending happened to us in July of 1977 after our book, quote, Secrets of the UFO, was published. We had been interviewed on local programs, and a woman in a nearby town had heard the broadcast and was very interested in what we had to say, since her son, a normal 14-year-old boy, had had a UFO encounter. And by the way, if you yourself have had a UFO encounter, please put it in the comments, because I would love to hear about it. I've had one. It's not that exciting. It was kind of funny, but another time. He had been awakened by a whistling sound, went to the door, and saw a light so bright that it temporarily blinded him. Again, as it often is the case, it was the same night that people nearby also saw lights in the sky. The woman wrote us a letter, and Dawn immediately called and asked her permission to speak to her son. After questioning the young man to Dawn's satisfaction, Dawn asked him to take a piece of silverware and tell it to bend without touching it in any firm or forceful way. The 14-year-old picked up a fork, did as Dawn suggested, and the fork immediately bent nearly double. But there is no spoon. Okay. The boy was so startled that he would not come back to the phone, and his mother was unable to convince him that there was any value in going further with the experiments. She had enough foresight to realize that in the small town in which he lived, any publicity that might come to him on the subject of metal bending would be to his detriment, since the people of his small town would react in a most predictable way. Aww. Nevertheless, the link is there quite plainly. John Taylor, professor of mathematics of King's College London, offered his book Superminds to make his careful experimentation on mental bending available to the world. Taylor used only children, about 50 of them, and for a great portion of his experiment, he used metal and plastic objects sealed in glass cylinders which had been closed by a glass blower so that the children could not actually touch the object without breaking the glass. Under these controlled circumstances, the children were still able to bend and break multi-something objects. As you read the raw material, you will begin to discover why it is mostly children that are able to do these things, and what the ability to do this has to do with the rest of the UFO message. I know I'm just supposed to be reading these, but I keep coming. Be as little children keeps coming to mind from the Bible, of course. Since I am not a scientist at this point, I will turn the narrative back to Dawn, whose background is more suited to this discussion. Back to Dawn. Dawn, a persistent question when considering a psychic demonstration is, how does the paranormal event happen? ? The answer may well lie in the area of occult theory, which is concerned with the existence of various quote-unquote planes. After death, an individual finds himself at one of these levels of existence spoken of in connection with occult philosophy. The level of being dependent on the spiritual nature or development of the person at the time of his death. The cliche that covers this theory is heavenly, quote, birds of a feather flock together, end quote. When a ghost materializes into our reality, it is from one of these levels that he usually comes for his earthly visit. In general, It is theorized that a planet is a sort of spiritual distillery. I'm going to say that one again. In general, I'm even going to underline that. In general, it is theorized that a planet is a sort of spiritual distillery. Excuse me. With reincarnation taking place into the physical world, into the individual is sufficiently developed in the spiritual sense that he can reach the higher planes of existence and is no longer in need of this planet's developmental lessons. That is freaking brilliant. I want to say it a third time. In general, it is theorized that a planet is a sort of spiritual distillery, with reincarnation taking place into the physical world until the individual is sufficiently developed in the spiritual sense that he can reach the higher planes of existence and is no longer in need of this planet's developmental lessons. Feast on that for a minute. Continuing on. Most of the theory was developed as a result of report contact and communication with the inhabitants of these supposedly separate realities. I have come to believe that these levels interpenetrate with our physical space and mutually coexist, though with very little awareness of each other. A simple analogy to which I've referred to before is to consider the actors in two different TV shows, both receivable on the same set, but each show being exclusive of one another. These seems to be what we experience in our daily lives, one channel or density of existence being totally unaware of the myriad entities occupying other frequencies of our physical space. The point of all this is that our reality is not ultimate or singular. It is, in fact, our reality only at the present. And at the present, I'm going to let my dog in. Oh. Come on, Dex. Boo-boo, where'd you go? There you are. Look, it's cold outside. Many of the UFO reports... I'm supposed to be going to the gym. Have you ever had a gym membership that you just paid $40 for 2 months running and you still haven't gone? It's only the beginning of the second month. Anyway, I'm going today after these readings. Many of the UFO reports, so please send good energy in that direction. I need it. I got a lot of building to do in the future. Many of the UFO reports display ample evidence that the object sighted has its origin in one of these other realities or densities, just as do the materialized ghosts. I would like to emphasize that this does not in any way imply their unreality. Rather, it displaces the UFO's reality from ours. I'm saying the equivalent of Channel 4 on the TV is equivalent to but displaced from Channel 3 on the same TV. If you were told to build a scale model of any atom, ATOM, using something the size of a pea for the nucleus, it would be necessary to have an area the size of a football stadium to contain even the innermost orbital electrons. If the pea were placed at the center of the 50-yard line, a small cotton ball on the uppermost seat in the stands would represent the electron of the atom. There is very little actual matter in physical matter. When you look at the stars in the night sky, you would probably see something quite similar to what you would see if you would stand on the nucleus of an atom of solid, quote-unquote, material and look outward toward our environment. To demonstrate an electron to you, a physicist will probably show you a curved trace of one on a photographic plate. What he probably does not tell you is that this is secondhand evidence. The electron itself has never been seen. Only its effect on a dense medium can be recorded. It is possible, of course, to make accurate mathematical calculations about we call an electron. For such work, we must know some data on magnetic field strength, electron charge, and velocity. But since a magnetic field is caused by moving charges, which in turn are empirically observed phenomenon, we find that the entire mathematical camouflage obscures the fact that all we really know is that charged particles have effects on each other. Certainly, I don't feel so bad about ditching and then failing science my whole life. We still don't know what charged particles are or why they create an action at a distance effect. Senior scientists would be the first to agree that there is no such thing as an absolute scientific explanation of anything. Science is, rather, a method or a tool of prediction. Suddenly, I don't think they should talk shit on astrologers. What do you say? Science is, rather, a method or a tool of prediction relating one or more observations to each other. In physics, this is usually done through the language of mathematics. For scientific learning is a learning by observation and analysis of this observation. In the sense of penetrating the fundamental essence of things, we really do not understand anything at all. A magnetic field is nothing but a mathematical method of expressing the relative motion between electrical fields. Electrical fields are complex mathematical interpretations of a totally empirical observation stated as Coulomb's law. Coulomb's law. In other words, our forest of scientific knowledge and explanation is made up of trees about which we understand nothing except their effect, their existence. To a person unfamiliar with the inner workings of a modern science, it may seem that modern man has his environment nicely under control and totally figured out. Nothing could be further from the truth. The leaders of science who are researching the frontiers of modern theory argue among themselves continually as soon as a theory begins to receive wide acceptance as being a valid representation of physical laws. Someone finds a discrepancy, and the theory has to be either modified or abandoned entirely. Perhaps the most well-known example of this is Newton's, quote, F equals ma, end quote. F equals ma. I'd never even heard of it. This attained the status of a physical law before being found to be an error. It is not that this equation has not proven extremely useful. We have used it to design everything from a moon rocket to the television picture tube, but its accuracy fails when applied to atomic particles accelerators like this. Its accuracy fails when applied to atomic particle accelerators like the cyclotron. To make accurate predictions of, I could say so much about those particle accelerators, like they create black holes. Thank you, CERN. But anyway, to make accurate predictions of particle trajectories, it is necessary to make the relativistic correction formulated by Einstein. It is interesting to note that this correction is based on the fact that the speed of light is totally independent of the speed of its source. If Newton had penetrated more deeply into the laws of motion, he may have made his relativistic correction himself, and then stated that the velocity correction would always be of no consequence, since the velocity of light was so much greater than any speed attained by man. This was very true in Newton's day, but it is definitely not the case now. We will tend to think of the velocity of light as a fantastic and unattainable speed, but with the advent of space flight, a new order of velocity has arrived. We have to change our thinking from our normal terrestrial concepts of velocities. Instead of thinking of the speed of light in the terms of miles per second, think of it in terms of Earth diameters per second. That almost unimaginable 186,000 miles per second becomes an entirely thinkable 23 Earth diameter per second, or we would think of the speed of light in terms of our solar system's diameters and say that the light would speed at about 2 diameters per day. Einstein's assertion that everything is relative is so apt that it has become a cliche of our culture. Let us continue being relativistic in considering the size of natural phenomena by considering the size of our galaxy. Hi, Kitty. Kitty says hi. There she is. Love her. Let us continue being relativistic in considering the size of the natural phenomenon by considering the size of our galaxy. If you look at the sky on a clear night, nearly all of the visible stars are in our own galaxy. Raise your hand if you do that every night. If you look, this is why I live in Arizona, y'all. Although I have a new goal. I'm told by a reliable source that there are 4 of everything. Thank you, Deanna. And if there are 4 of anything, it means that there are 3 other places other than Arizona with these sort of skies. I'm going to find them and I'll let you know. Einstein's assertions that everything is relative is so apt that it has become a cliche of our culture. Let us continue being relativistic in considering the size of natural phenomena by considering the size of our galaxy. Thank you for your patience. If you look at the sky on a clear night, nearly all of the visible stars are in our own galaxy. Each of these stars is a sun like our own. The calculation of the ratio of the number of suns in our galaxy to the number of people on the planet Earth discovers that there are 60 sums for each 60 suns. There are 60 suns for each living person in the earth today. Remember, this book was written in the 80s. It takes light over 4 years to get from Earth to even the nearest of these stars. An entire high school career. What? Yeah. It takes light over 4 years to get from Earth to even the nearest of these stars. To reach the most distant star in our own galaxy would take 10,000 light years. Excuse me, 100,000 light years. People that know math were like, wait a minute. To reach the most distant star in our galaxy would take 100,000 light years. These calculations are made using the assumption that light has a speed. Let me say that again. These calculations are made using the assumption that light has a speed. This may be an erroneous assumption in the face of new theory, but its apparent speed is a useful measuring tool, so we use it anyway. Well, so we have a creation in which we find ourselves, which is so big that at a speed of 23 Earth diameters a second, we must travel 100,000 years to cross our immediate backyard. And we still think we're the only ones. Oh no. That is a big backyard. And it would seem ample for even the most ambitious of celestial architects. But in truth, this entire galaxy of over 200 billion stars is just one grain of sand on a very big beach. There are uncounted trillions of galaxies like ours, each with its own billions of stars spread throughout what seems to be infinite space. When you think of the mind-boggling expanse of our creation and the infantile state of our knowledge in relation to it, you begin to see the necessity for considering the strong probability that our present scientific approach to investigating these expanses is as primitive as the dugout canoe. I don't know what a dugout canoe is, but I guess guess it's primitive. The most perplexing problem of science has always been finding a satisfactory explanation of what is called action at a distance. In other words, everyone knows that if you drop something, it will fall, but no one knows precisely why. Many people know that electric charges push or pull on each other, even if separated in a vacuum, but again, no one knows why. Although the phenomena are quite different, the equations which describe the force of interaction are quite similar. For gravitation, it's F equals GMM. Yeah. Okay. It's that. That. The other one's that. So, for electrical interactions, F equals K Q. No. Let me try that again. For gravitation, it's F equals capital G, small m, something dash R2. The electrostatic interaction is capital F equals capital K, lowercase q, thingy, slash R2. The attractive force between our planet and our sun is described by the gravitational equation. The attractive force between orbiting electrons and the atomic nucleus is described by the electrostatic interaction equation. Okay. Now, each of these equations are determined experimentally. In other words, they don't fucking know. They are not that I'm dissing them, I get it, it's cool. Cool tool to use till they get it or figure out more. They are not apparently related in any way, and yet they both describe a situation in which attractive force falls off from the square of the distance of separation. So how far is it? A mathematical representation of an action at a distance effect is called a field. Well, finally, something I could totally remember. Okay, cool. Such as gravitational or electrical field. It was Albert Einstein's foremost hope. That's actually really interesting. I like that. A mathematical representation of an action at a distance effect is called a field. It was Albert Einstein's foremost hope to find a single relation which would express the effect of both electric and gravitational phenomenon. In fact, a theory which would unify the whole of physics, a unified field of theory. Einstein believed that this was a creation of a total order and that all physical phenomena were evolved from a single source. Well, this unified field theory, describing a matter as pure field, has been accomplished now. It seems that the entire situation was analogous, no idea what that word is, to the solution of ponderously complex Chinese puzzle. If you find that the right key turns amongst so many wrong ones, the puzzle easily falls apart. Dewey B. Larson found the solution to this problem, and the puzzle not only fell apart, but revealed an elegantly adequate unified field theory, rich in practical results. And, like a good Chinese puzzle, the solution was not complex, just unexpected. Instead of assuming 5 dimensions, Larson assumed 6, and properly labeled them as the 3 dimensions of space and the 3 dimensions of time. He assumed that there is 3-dimensional coordinate time analogs to our observed 3-dimensional space. The result of this approach is that one can now calculate from the basic postulate of Larson's theory any physical value within our physical universe from subatomic to stellar. This long sought after unified field theory is different because we are accustomed to thinking of time as one-dimensional, as a stream moving in one direction. Yet, once you get the hang of it, coordinate time is mathematically a more comfortable concept with which to deal. Professor Frank Mayer of the Department of Physics at the University of Wisconsin presently distributes a quarterly newsletter to scientists interested in Larson's law theory, which explores perplexing questions in physical theory using Larson's approach. I was interested in testing Larson's theory and made extensive calculations using his postulate. I became convinced that his theory is indeed a workable unified field theory. Good job, Mr. Larson. I have been pondering several interesting statements communicating through the contactees by the alleged UFO source prior to discovering Larson's work in the early 60s. Although the people who had received these communications knew nothing of the problem of modern physics, they were getting information which apparently was quite central to physical theory. First, they suggested that the problem with our science was that it did not recognize enough dimensions. Second, they stated that the light does not move. Light is. Larson's theory posits 6 dimensions instead of the customary 4 and finds the pure field, which Einstein believes would represent matter, to move outward from all points in space at unit velocity, or the velocity of light. Photons, P-H-O-T-O-N-S, photons are created due to a vibratory displacement in space/time. That's a good one. Photons are created due to vibratory displacements in space-time, the fabric of the field. I love toning. Have I mentioned I love toning? Do you love toning? Maybe you should try toning. Further, the contactees were saying that consciousness creates vibration. This vibration being light. The vibratory displacement of space-time in Larson's theory are the first physical manifestations, which is the photon, or light. According to the UFO contactees, the UFOs lower their vibration in order to enter our skies. The entire physical universe postulated by Larson is dependent on the rate of vibration and quantized rotations of the pure field of space-time. The contactees were suggesting that time was not what we think it is. Larson suggests the same thing. The UFOs were said to move in time as we move in space. This would be entirely normal in Larson's time-space portion of the universe. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the contactees were receiving the message that the creation is simple, all one thing. Larson's theory is a mathematical statement of this unity. For more information about Larsonian physics, contact the International Society of Unified Science, a group of scientists and philosophers currently promoting Larson's theory. Their address is International Society of Unified Science, second line, Frank H. Mayer, President. Third line, 1103 15th Avenue, S.E. Minneapolis, MN, zip code 55414. And we'll leave it there because we're hitting 30 minutes and I still gotta read one more book before I get my butt to the gym finally. Okay, love you guys. Talk to you soon.